Hello, everyone. I am here with Pui Wo Lee, and I'm Seth Dellinger, and this is the Meaningful Movement podcast. Excited, this is the third episode. So, briefly, Paul, like myself, is a Feldenkrais practitioner. He is also an extraordinary dancer. Currently serves as the rehearsal director and choreographic assistant for the contemporary dance group of Curious Nature, which is in Bremen, Germany, which is where you're talking to me from today. And actually, I met Paul in person just once. We're internet friends for the most part, but he danced at the Kennedy Center here in Washington, D.C. I think that was 4 or 5 years ago, right? And that was the Anderson Dance Group, is that?
Yeah, Anderson Dance, yeah.
Yeah, so Paul was fantastic, and he was also incredibly funny. I remember that one of the things in the performance, I mean, there's a whole group and it was an amazing performance, but one of the things that you kept doing is walking around the stage and then just falling on your face repeatedly, which was kind of fun. I think you had you had like a pillow.
I had pillows.
Yeah. All right.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. And yeah, it's nice to be speaking to you again.
Yeah.
We always chat for hours. So, and we're always like, oh, we should have pressed the record button. Hopefully people will get something out of our exchange.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they will. And I guess there's a lot of places we could start, but I was taking a look at your website today. And as you know, what I like to focus on in these conversations is the question of how an individual can build a movement practice over time, something that's, the phrase I like to use is a sustainable and meaningful personal growth practice. And I was just struck by a line on your website, or no, this is perhaps from an article. Anyway, this is something you said, that at a certain point you realized judging the right-wrongness of movement could hinder one's ability to regain their balance in response to life's diverse situations. So I don't know, it's just a jumping off point, but what did you mean by that?
Well, coming from a training in classical ballet, it was quite a miracle that I got accepted into ballet school, because I don't have the hip rotation needed. My hips weren't open enough, didn't have enough hip rotation. But somehow I got in. That the artistic director at the National Ballet School in Toronto, she saw something in me. And so I think she saw the artist and not really just the amount of facility or the absence of. So how does that go into right and wrongness? So ballet, there's a very clearly defined aesthetic, and it's very different from what it was originally. That standards have become more and more extreme in recent decades, and it's almost like you can say it's an exploitation of the body of the person. And so what is right is being turned out to have a certain look in the musculature. Things are rotated, feet with high arches, beautiful lines. So I guess that I knew so strongly what was right according to the ballet aesthetic. So actually for many, many years, and still I'm figuring it out, but less bothered by it. I realized that I didn't even know how to walk. I didn't know how to be in standing on the ground, that it was always sort of up to chance. I didn't understand how to be grounded. I just knew the shapes that I was supposed to be in. And with in ballet, when you point your foot, so seeing it from the front, you're not supposed to what we call sickle. It's like this is like you're harvesting wheat, and this is considered ugly and bad. And you're supposed to keep it straight, or even what we call wing the foot or suckle out, which is like that, so that it just tilts upwards like that. And so knowing that, or having that, holding this as my right or wrong, my foot, or it would, yeah, let's just say my foot, my ankles would be in a bit of conflict, because does it meet the floor in a way that's functional, or does it have to meet the floor in a way where I can sort of balance but look good? And I guess this is really what I meant, as a personal example. But then, what I wrote in this article about sexual health, sensual health, essentially talking about how sexual health stems from one accepting, who they are and the possibilities, actually allowing them to embody the possibilities. So with my mom, I remember that before I knew Feldenkrais and before I went off to ballet school, that I had been seeking permission to move my pelvis, because in ballet training, again, depending on who teaches you, but there are lots of teachers that say, stabilize your pelvis, don't move your pelvis, just move your legs.
How
And
old were you when you started ballet training?
oh, I fell in love with ballet when I was 4. Then
So in
I,
other words, these ideas about standing properly, moving properly, you were hearing this stuff from a very young age.
I would say since I was 8,
Okay.
because it wasn't until I was in Hong Kong when I started ballet training when I was growing up in Canada. Then um, we returned to Hong Kong with the family, and then I was urged to continue with ballet by a teacher, actually, in primary school, Miss Lee. I will not forget her. And but it was in Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, classical ballet will for sure survive or thrive in Hong Kong, because Hong Kong is very judgmental, and it's all about standards, all about fulfilling what is right and wrong. So I didn't realize that there was anything wrong with me until I went to ballet classes in Hong Kong, where I was told I didn't have the right flexibility in my hips, my back, my muscles were shaped all the wrong way. It was, I just built, using Feldenkrais terms, I built the self-image that I was not correct, that I was not made for ballet, that everything I had was against it. So it was like a whole re-education of not really liking myself and what I had. So back to my mom, so I was locked up. I really loved ballet so dearly. The more I loved it, the more it seemed to hate me back. It was painful. And then I was asking for permission because I was already forced to be highly analytical about why certain dancers would have more success technically, artistically, and why some wouldn't, and how could I help myself. I was already really analytical, and I realized that the pelvis can't really, like what we call an arabesque, which is just having the leg behind, that I couldn't, even after ballet school, it was so difficult for me to understand how to do it in my own body, because there were many things that would look wrong if I found a functional way to do it. And so this was maybe when I was 11, 12, speaking with my mom. My mom had been having issues with her back mainly, but everywhere. She just always felt, um, you know, like something was off. And of course, I wanted to help her. And then somehow it met my agenda as well. And then I realized, I was like, Mom, maybe it's okay to move your pelvis, only because I see other people do it. But I think it might be actually healthy to let the pelvis move as you walk.
And this was
And
you as an 11-year-old?
yeah, I was serious,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, I'm a fun-loving person, but I'm very serious, even when it comes to fun. And then she just felt she was it was so awkward for her, because she's like, kind of, it does feel good, but it also goes against what she considered right or wrong. That a woman, if she moved her pelvis too much, it would send off signals, too sensuous, too indulgent, a woman shouldn't be like this, should be more reserved. And, so just with that movement, it stirred up so many beliefs about what was right or wrong, conditioned beliefs, yeah, conditioned patterns. So it's these, and when you start doing a lot of Feldenkrais, then I think what continues to flow onto the surface is actually looking at your habits and then understanding why you have not moved in a certain way. And I would say, at this point, from what I've observed so far, that a lot of it has a social reason, because it's considered socially inappropriate or socially awkward, that we hold ourselves in that respect. And going back to the ballet example, to move in a certain way in a ballet class would be inappropriate to that social context. So right now I observe it and I find, I don't feel like I fall victim to it, but it's really interesting to, for myself and to help others point out, that we continue to hold on to certain standards of right and wrong.
Right, right. So there's actually a whole lot of things that you just brought up already. Some listeners on this channel may not be as familiar with the Feldenkrais method, and we don't necessarily have to try to explain the method in the course of our conversation. It's kind of a complex thing, but you used a phrase which I think is worth saying a couple words about, which is the phrase the self-image. And for those who aren't familiar, Moshe Feldenkrais, the inventor of the Feldenkrais method, which we both teach, he talked about the self-image as essentially how do we imagine ourselves, right? It could be, I imagine that I have two arms and two legs and a spine, and I kind of have a sense of how I'm put together, and that's what helps me walk down the street. But it also could be, the question of my self-esteem or my preferences or whatever it is. I tell a story about who I am. And so long as I live inside that story, and we all live in some kind of a story, that story defines what my possibilities are. So one of his incredible innovations, even though he's, on the surface, he's teaching movement, is he began to say to people, look, the way you move is based on your self-image. And so he taught movement, but he actually worked with people on the image. And this question of whether something is right or wrong is something that he was particularly, he liked to talk about this because we have an image, a self-image, but I think your story starts to show how we construct that image. And I'm sure if there's anyone watching who's also been through any formal dance training, they're already resonating with your story. But you, at a very young age, younger than a lot of people, were getting very specific ideas about how to move the body, how not to move the body. And you've already showed us an arabesque and a couple of things that you do quite well, and yet would you even say, you said you were unsure how to stand or walk, so was it even like daily life felt awkward because you had been doing all this trained movement, this movement that was very much explicitly right or wrong, and then you walk out of the class to just go on with your life, but you're a little kind of discombobulated? Is that more or less what you were saying?
Oh, there were, so many different directions where information came in that would throw me in a loop and make me very confused about my standing in the world. I would take the aesthetic values of ballet into my normal life. And then also I had severe flat feet as a child, and my toes were pointing inwards, and that raised some red flags for my parents, and also people on the streets would comment to my parents, maybe he should go see someone for this, and then it all became something that was just uh, very unbecoming, let's say, for a child too. It wasn't aesthetic in outside the world of ballet, but also in daily life, to see a child walk like this was not it was not pleasing to the eye. And so I think I have a history with my feet, which is why I love the work with the feet, very much inspired by the work from JKA, the Jeremy Krause approach, working with special needs children. But through that process, just to get to the basics of how the ankles move and how that actually helps the whole line of action, let's say, through your body, it's just remarkable. It's something that has helped me deepen a intuitive understanding of the martial arts as well. So yeah, so I brought some of the ballet aesthetic into daily life, the values from ballet. Then I also had the flat feet, and then got orthotics from the chiropractor, which was very helpful. But I had kept building more and more beliefs, because I also want to say that beliefs and habits are not necessarily bad. They can be very functional as well. That if we had to reconsider everything consciously, at every moment of our lives, our brains would really just cook.
It'd be too much, yeah.
It's too much. But so then, I think it's a bit of a protective mechanism as well, to gather all these beliefs. So then from the orthotics, it was also like arched foot good, flat foot bad, toes turning outwards better than toes turning inwards, straight might be even better. Then, and again, what is very interesting to start identifying, or start to wake up from the matrix, and see, is that, wow, we have built all these boundaries with these constructs of belief to hold us, in line. So also this thing about the knee being aligned, bending and being aligned with the toes, being aligned with the second toe, the big toe, or, there are conversations like that as well. And how much do we take that into our daily image of ourselves, and then that affects our functioning. So yeah.
Well, if I heard you right, it was like there were particular ways of moving that were right when you were in ballet class, but as soon as you walked out, it felt wrong, or you just were confused about what right was, because it was no longer this context where there was these specific rules, but you're trying to, I mean, if I remember this article correctly, and you started talking about the discussion with your mother, it seems like that was a moment where you were maybe questioning a bit of what you'd been told at that point. I mean, how did that happen? Because it seems to me that from what you're saying already, and just from other conversations, that you got past this at a certain point, this idea that this is correct and this isn't. How would you define it now? I mean, you're teaching movement today, and I know that often one of the questions I get all the time is like, is this right? Am I doing it right? So how do you talk today about right and wrong, and how did you sort of come to that after this initial experience of being told very explicitly, you're not walking the right way, you're not standing the right way?
Yeah. I think that, first of all, I want to give room for people and for them to feel supported. So I've realized that in working with people, we're dealing all the time with anxiety, because our existence has to do with anxiety, fears, finding balance, And so before, I think even up until a few months ago, I would still avoid to say right or wrong, but this is like a principle that I would stick to for most of the time. But maybe for some people, it's very destabilizing, and more, it would provoke even more insecurity to say you're free and everything is right and there is no wrong. Then you don't have any structure to base yourself on. So I would say that if someone needs to, we can narrow down to what is right for you at the moment, what is wrong. And then maybe we can start transitioning into words like what feels better for you. When do you feel more stable, more supported, so that you're at ease? So then that's a transition I think I would use these days, that maybe someone needs to know what's right or wrong. And the thing about Hong Kong is it's really interesting to have this, to have been in these different cultures, because um, in Hong Kong, what you say to children as a compliment, or yeah, as a compliment, or a sign of approval, it's something that might be very demeaning if you translate that into other languages. And so in Hong Kong, you would say, "Oh, 乖仔啦,乖女," which means obedient boy, obedient girl. So you're listening. Oh, yes, 聽話. 聽話 means to listen to the words, which means the words of your parents. You know, 聽話 is you're following the words, the wishes of your parents or your elders. And that is something that is prized in the society and culture of Hong Kong. So this is where I come from. And I think that also is what I came up against a lot in trying to improve myself, because I came to Feldenkrais with a neck injury, to like, how much was I trying to
From a
satisfy?
dance? Was
Yeah.
that the injury was through dance?
Yeah. Dance, it's the way I was using myself, basically. I think I would have injured myself doing anything with that image of myself that I developed. But yeah, I was trying to be that obedient boy, trying to seek the approval or earn the approval of others. And I took everything, so now I also like to tell people, be a great learner and be a bad student, because you should be able, and this goes into maturity, which is what we deal with, right, as Feldenkrais teachers, that I think in order to have a healthy, sustainable movement practice, or to have sustainable movement, you need to be the better judge of what's good for you and not. That's the learning. It's not, when you think that the learning is about, oh, I can roll my pelvis to carry the weight of my knees, my legs up, or I can use my chest to help move, to support the neck and to move my head around, to learn things in those chunks, like in a textbook form. Great. Let's not say it's bad. Great. But another more potent way of seeing learning is that you begin to be able to feel the connections throughout yourself. And it's this dynamic, it's that family of knowing the nature of what good movement feels like, and inside of you, getting into that dynamic, that feeling, which is not a word to be taken lightly. The feeling is what I see as a collective intelligence. When you really cultivate this feeling, it's intelligence, it is wisdom. And I think that is what I'm after, to help people these days. Because, when people go and seek just these small bits of information, really it's so specific. Should you hold the cup with the elbow out or hold the cup with the elbow down? It's so, how would you say, prescriptive. But if I can feel the difference, which is heavier and lighter, and to also say I can do both, that there's function in both, depending on what scenario you're in, then we're speaking to something that I think is much, yeah, it's much grander, you know, and more reliable, more, yeah, dependable in the long run. So,
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people probably don't even think about the distinction, so to just awaken a curiosity about that can be a real turning point for someone. And then it's funny, again, what can happen is if you have that conversation with someone, that opens up the next question can often be, well, which one is right? And so what I hear you saying is, no, I'm going to throw it back at you. Try the one, try the other, see what you feel. And then maybe right and wrong is something that we each can come to for ourselves a little bit. But I know there's more to this story, and there's another phrase you dropped in there right at the beginning, and people might have been like, wait, what was that? So you also mentioned sexual health.
mhm.
And I mean, ballet, I know, is a very presentational art. So, but also you talked about walking as a young kid and someone saying, well, that is not nice to see. So, and I just knowing know that this is a big question for you. So appearances, how we appear to others, how we feel about the way we look. Um, can you fill in a little more of your experience on that?
Oh, I would love to. And thank you for leading me to this point because, um, sorry, I just really am so thankful for having met the Feldenkrais method because I got to see, expression was what my life was about. Training to be a dancer or just identifying as an artist, from a very young age. Um, I did not envision myself going to be an accountant, going to law school, doctor, all those really, all those, yeah, professions.
Different path.
That I never saw myself going there. And so I relied on my artistry, creativity, the expression. Um, and my mom is the more expressive one. My dad was not so much. And there was, living in Canada where the freedom of expression was again valued. Being in Hong Kong, not being so overtly expressive is the standard of a good citizen. So I really found an outlet through dance. But then
How old were
I,
you when you went from Canada to Hong Kong?
I was, I think I was turning 8.
So was it in that sense of those two different kind of cultural atmospheres? Was it a kind of a drastic change for you?
Very drastic.
Mhm.
Yeah, you know. When I came back to Hong Kong, they're like, "Oh, you're all westernized now." So from then on, I felt like a foreigner. Being in Canada, I felt like a foreigner being in Hong Kong, and I'm just a citizen of the world now,
Okay.
just to have somewhere to land again. But
So you
yeah,
started your dance training. You said expression was really at the center of
yeah.
your life at
but-
this point.
And what Feldenkrais really helped me value was seeing expression as a function that why we're successful as a species is because of our highly nuanced ways of communicating with each other. Because expression, yes, you can say it's an outlet, but then um, to finish that sentence is to be an outlet and connect with others in order to be able to do things together, to partner up, right? So actually, I, now I'm just training my body, and Feldenkrais has helped me find better ways of like doing some push-ups, doing abs, like general workouts, and to actually add another layer of artistry to it. And I becoming less and less shy about showing off, my body, because I'm not going to wait until it's all it's all gone, to show
You're
it.
one of the few Feldenkrais practitioners who sometimes poses without a shirt on, which is fun.
But
It's
if you,
great.
yeah, and if you think in terms of survival, how looks are have everything to do with survival. How many people make a living and a very abundant living based on how they take care of themselves and how they look, you know? And so I think, how do we train ourselves to work in a refined manner that we can get results, you know, and look a certain way, present ourselves in a certain way, which is, you know, what people recognize as health and vitality and fitness, because that's attractive. Like a lot of people, not everyone, you know, but it is a standard of health, and attractiveness, sensual power, you know, it's all mixed in there. So I really think that, expression is a function, and the better we move, it's the more expressive range and choice we have as well. You know, if I were just constantly, contracted here and I didn't know about it, this was just my going image, and it's like this, and it's kind of cool as well, and I think I can get you know, you can groove with this as well. But then it's if you're always here, it tells you mentioned story, but what is the story that people constantly get of you? But if I start having this possibility as well, I can be here, 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 you know, and everything in between. Then you're projecting another image of yourself, and who knows what you're going to attract from that, right?
But
So
if we can back up a little bit though, because how old were you when you found Feldenkrais?
24, I think.
Okay.
23, 24.
So before you found Feldenkrais though, because we were at the part of the story, I think you were 8 and you moved back to Hong Kong.
Mhm.
And what you were just explaining sounds like someone who's kind of been on the journey and come to the other side, and these questions of right or wrong, or you should appear this way or you shouldn't, you've resolved a lot of that for yourself. But it sounds like as a younger person, I mean, did you struggle with this? Did you have, and also, you know, just in terms of this question of sensuality, what was your younger experience that made you want to emphasize this so much now that, you know, you have sort of reached a new place through your Feldenkrais work and the other things you've been doing, you know, as an adult?
I think, yeah, this is, you know, I think it has to do with my dad a bit. I'll bring him in because, he's no longer, with us, but, he was always like the medicine man in the family, you know, the extended family. Whenever someone had ailments, he was consulted, and he never refused to help. And I think, maybe it's our whole family. We want to help people because it gives us pleasure. And sometimes especially when you see pain, you want to remedy that. And if we don't have the answers, we like to direct people to those who have better answers. And so I think I observed how people around me were struggling, especially with my mom, you know, with her just body issues. And then with myself, because I was also, you know, I was already more on the effeminate side as a young child. I loved Peking Opera, and I would dress up, you know, in robes, and then I sometimes had the long beards of the men, but I also was completely taken by the female power, in Peking Opera. The power of sadness, of the femininity was always something that I was very drawn to. And then, of course, it's obvious that I ran into difficulties, you know, sometimes, with people on the streets, peers, but even with, certain members of the family, where some would be like, maybe think about like controlling your gestures, the way that you, um you know, you carry yourself, you know, just be a bit mindful. And then some people would some people in the family were just like, wow, okay, sissy,
Mm.
you know, going there. So I think I was destined to work in this field, helping people find a healthy relationship, I think.
I mean, at that point, when you ran into family members or other people like that, did you find that you were trying to modulate your behavior around them and making,
Sure.
or
But,
so
but
that's
this is
like an
exactly the
internal
point.
tug of war you create for yourself.
And this is exactly the point of why expression is so powerful, because as much as it can attract the attention you want, you also attract negative attention with it. So not only are we dealing with survival in terms of trying to earn more money, this is what survival is these days, to make ends meet. And sometimes it's about like personal safety, right? Like if I were in a neighborhood, maybe in a culture, anywhere where my way of being was frowned upon, like with a limp wrist somewhere, this will also set red flags. And yeah, and of course, it this is not what we deal with, I think, in Feldenkrais, but it's sort of in the same family where sometimes, it's like, I don't know why people like they don't see me as trustworthy or something, like why don't they see me as someone dependable, whatever, and you're going around like this, and it's very different when you're speaking from this place. So, but anyways, back to my story. Yes, I think all of what I've written recently about sensuality and all my stirrings about what movement means, and what health means, and what does artistry, freedom as a person means, it comes from these experiences in my childhood, which, and I hardly think about it now. And being gay for me is like I'm proud to say that at this moment, I forgot that it was an issue. Sometimes I'm like, oh yes, my type is supposed to like women, like, so I've really come a long way. But back then I remember it was like, oh, like I didn't even see the struggle I was in, but that was my reality. Like, oh, I shouldn't be like this, but then how should I be? Because already I was dealing with authenticity. And I think that this was before I was 10. And like, oh, but it still seems like I don't want to be that cliche basketball type. Everyone was playing basketball at that time, but why do I have to? Like, I want to be doing other things which are cool, but if I do that, it's people laugh at me, or people make me feel bad. They say things that, and sometimes I remember that it was not really hard for me. I didn't want my mom to hear it because it would hurt her even more. And so, yeah, I think I really was offered a lens into how important movement is, and how we can have flexibility with
Mhm.
it.
Well, yeah, and it's really interesting. As you were talking, I was thinking of, in my case, as you know, I've done some dance, but I'm not trained at all. It was all in improvisational context. I was in a dance group here in Washington, D.C. for maybe it was only a half a year or so, but I was in a number of performances, and it was all based on improvisation. But before that, I'm someone who's actually, at a certain point, I thought, gosh, maybe if I had been introduced to dance as a young person, that would have been a great thing for me, because it's only, I realized that I've loved movement for a much longer than I realized I loved movement.
Mhm.
So when I was like a teenager or whatever, I would just put on music and be in my room, and I would move around because it felt good, but I wasn't thinking about performance, but I was really, you know, moving around and doing this. But I've done so much of it that at a certain point I was like, But one distinct thing that I know I felt a number of times just by following the feeling in my body and moving is, every once in a while I would think to myself, I think I'm moving a little more like a girl, or I'm moving a little more womanly right now. And there was this simultaneous feeling of like, maybe I don't want someone to see me doing that. And at the same time, there was this feeling of like, oh, wow, if I don't worry about that, I get to feel things in my body that
Mm.
I don't normally feel when I do my guy thing, because I probably was trying to look more like a basketball player or whatever growing up. But I had those experiences. And, today also just doing Feldenkrais, you realize that even just the conception of how a man should move or how a woman should move, it's limiting. It's not necessarily, again, right or wrong for any particular individual. Some people are going to feel really good to meet the expectations that everyone has and not feel that they are somehow artificially molding themselves into something that they're not. But the willingness to do something that doesn't even fit the stereotype of our given gender is actually can be very liberating. Just because, again, literally, you'll feel sensations you wouldn't feel otherwise.
Yeah, it's you know, it also helped me understand what people were trying to do in meditation, to um, observe the existence of the judgments and then find, let's say, the space between the judgments. Um, and this is it, that, you know, I have to say that non there are people, there are choreographers that would rather work with actors or with people who are not trained, because I think that the that individual, that's the system, is listening to something else, is feeling something else. It's not feeling and acting according to the judgments of the formation, the training, right, of the dancer, but it is based on the feeling of the functionality of the movements. So I know several dancer friends who started late, 17, 18, even 20, and they turned out to be magnificent dancers. And what that you know in another lifetime, maybe, or I'll collaborate with someone to do a study. But I think that these individuals have more self authority because they have been, there are certain things where they just do it, and the right is functional. Everyone has standards, but their standard is functional. It's not just aesthetic. And so they have that very strong filter of functionality in no matter what they do, no matter what challenges, what tasks they are given in a professional dance setting. They deal with it differently. They don't give up themselves into injury or into more dangerous places, I think, because they're feeling what is actually beneficial and favorable for their bodies. So this is something that I've observed, where people who have started late, and I love watching people who dance who are not trained, because I find it quite difficult. Now I'm better, but back at ballet school, I would rather be the one selling drinks at the school dance because I didn't know how to move otherwise. I didn't know how to dance and enjoy myself. Like there was something locked because it didn't conform to what I knew was dance or the standards of dance, what it should look like. So, if we go back to what you were talking about, sustainability or sustainable movement practice, I would urge people to try, if you're into dance, and especially if you have kids who are into dance, I would go for hip hop, the break dancing, something, something that you're training more functional patterns and the element of play, because you also are having a better relationship with your judgments because you just try things out, and when you look at classical ballet dancers or even contemporary dancers can get very serious and very heady and dogmatic, and then you go and look at hip hoppers and I know there's a a group of Spanish b-boy dancers here in Germany with one Italian, and like they're fantastic because they're not all about how they look, but how, yes, how they look, but it's a different standard. It's not about fulfilling something that just looks pretty, but something that is also grounded in the mechanics, you know, of how to be balanced in a strong way in the field of gravity. So I would urge people to really go for these types of dances. And funny enough is when I got the chance to dance in Hong Kong in a project there once, then there were some dancers with contemporary dancers, but they trained in Chinese folk dance. So there's a, you know, in a lot of the dance programs in China, in Hong Kong, not only do you have so it's ballet, I think there'll be contemporary, then there's classical Chinese dance and there's folk dance, Chinese folk dances. So the Chinese dance has, I think, um, has been heavily influenced by ballet, high legs, turned out, turns, jumps, and things. But then with the folk dances, you know, it's the folk dances from different regions in Mongolia. You know, it's a lot about the shoulders, and then there's something that is more of the Korean, or what became the Korean tradition, and it's like slow, and it's all about control and these subtleties. But what's interesting, you know, from this lesson in Feldenkrais, I realized this, you know, it's just twisting the arms and then letting it go into your chest and shoulders to see how everything, you know, these spirals work into the body. And then this just reminded me of Mongolian dance, but then you look at maybe some Russian folk dances, you know, or you go anywhere and there's this. And it's, you realize it's so functional and so healthy. And if you bring in the communicative dimension again, you're learning how to turn towards other people as well, right? So it's not a society where it's like you do you, you know, I do me, but that you are, it's somatic education in these folk dances. You know, you are creating community. You're learning how to use yourself to connect with others. So what one of the Chinese dancers, she told me, she's like, if you look, all the great Chinese contemporary dancers, most of them, or yeah, she will say that the ones that come from the folk dancing ones, folk dance line, they're there's something better. And you can even say there's more flavor because they have this character in it, which I think can be explained as well mechanically, you know.
Mhm.
But there's something that just sits right, you know, and it's ingrained in them. And then they incorporate this into some contemporary dance. And
It almost sounds like you're saying they just allow more of their own individuality to be expressed.
mm,
Not quite?
I wouldn't completely say that because it's a training, you know, and you also, there are certain aesthetics, but I feel with the folk dances, it works on something much more, it's grounded more in the basics, you
Mhm.
know, of human movement, something more central, more fundamental. And when it gets into like the classical Chinese dance and ballet, it's a lot of it is it's the bombastic quality. You got to be larger than life, you know, extend beyond yourself. Whereas folk, you know, with flamenco, you see it as well. You know, it's more cyclical, I would say, in my eyes. That there's again, you know, I'm like, could this be tested really in a lab where they have different variables that they look at to measure these things? But I feel that there's something really grounded. It's always grounded into the person rather than just trying to be out there all the time. So I think in terms of just movement health, it it gives people that base to move from, you know, so that they're sort of they're connected, more connected with themselves. But
Mhm.
I think that that's also something different than individuality
Right.
because
Okay.
yeah.
Got it. Yeah. Well, so if we sort of change course a little bit here, because you've been talking a lot about your dance background and the ideas about movement in the dance world, and you've taught a number of dancers as a Feldenkrais teacher. You've also worked with musicians quite a bit. So, you know, broadly speaking, this is the people that many come to mind when we hear the word artist. But you talk about artistry as a quality that I don't think you reserve just for professional or performing artists. And this is something that you've made a point about. And I mean, I'll just make one more comment just because there are some themes already in this conversation that in their own way, they're coming back to themes in some of the previous conversations, but I still feel like I'd love to hear you talk about, and maybe in the context of working with people who don't consider themselves, you know, dancers or artists in general, but they come to you and you're working with them on movement. It seems like, you know, we all have so many influences, and those influences, whether it's just family or some kind of formal training, again, it comes with this right and wrong. But
Mhm.
at a certain point, you know, at least it's been my experience as a Feldenkrais practitioner, at a certain point, it's those ideas that actually are leading people to some of their key difficulties. I mean, it might be expressed in their shoulder or their neck or their ankle, but it's this attachment to an idea that they've been holding on to for a long time that may well not serve them. And so you've counterposed this idea of artistry to that kind of stuckness. So could you talk about that a little bit?
Wow. Again, I just have to take a moment to regather to sort of like round up all the horses.
Yeah, yeah, there's a number of horses.
um, you know, I think what you said, you know, about yourself being in love with movement, you know, far longer than you realized, then it immediately made me think, you know, because I'm actually a very lazy person and I'm happy lying around, laying around. I need a very good reason, meaning to do something. You know, if I don't like going to the gym and working out and working hard, but if I, you know, I need to get a rush of something, you know, if it's a performance, if I need to express, you know, I feel that I am a metaphor for the frenzy, you know, that is taking over, you know, our lives, you know, to show people how, you know, the extreme of where we can go in order for them to see, you know, a calmer reality. Then I can engage myself like that. Or if I really love something, you know, I'm a foodie, and if I think about food, you know, it's in the realm of sensuality and sex for me as well. It's like, you know, so um what I want to say is that I think I'm in love with the meaning of movement more than movement itself. And for meaning, you only need to look around at your loved ones, and you see so much meaning in their movements. And um, you know, I admire my mom so much. And that's and I'm like, I can't question that anything she does is not art. It's very artistic, you know, how she's able, like when my father was sick, she worked her full-time job at the primary school that she was teaching at that time, and she was at the hospital every break with my dad. She hardly slept. She was able to manage, you know, family members coming in, out. Like I had no, like I was so paralyzed and helpless. And my mom was able to just juggle all these things and not be necessarily in a very, very sour mood, you know, like, and without going that extreme, you know, how does she trick you into eating everything on your plate? How does she keep her opinions, she makes people feel heard and keep her opinion aside in order to get what she wants for her family. you know, it's just one example from me, but look around and you'll see that you have artists around. So it's not just being um, uh, like gimmicky, saying that we're all artists. I
But do
really
you
believe.
think people see that? I mean, don't you ever run into people who say, "Okay, sure, Paul, but I'm not an artist."
And I think that maybe then it's true for them that they don't see themselves as artists. And I don't need to convince them otherwise. But in my view, I think it's just so, being an artist doesn't mean that you need to perform, you need to have it be on a certain stage, wear certain
Right.
makeup, costumes, have a certain skill. But I think artistry is being able to curate something for the moment, knowing that you have selected, there's a whole, you've selected options, strung them together, sewed them together, glued, whatever, but you prepared it for the moment. It was done with care, with consideration, and there's quality to it, and I think feeling is also in it. So it's a very, um, I don't know, it's such a refined process, and I won't say, like, to play the devil's advocate, I would also say that not all dancers are artists, because um I would say the person doing tai chi on their own in the park is very artistic in how they're choosing to feel those strong and at the same time smooth flowing pathways to to promote their health. That's very artistic and elevated. And then I see dancers who are so, okay, let's call them artists in destroying themselves, punishing themselves,
Hmm.
and it's just like so reckless.
Yeah.
So and I don't see, if that was a choice and not a compulsion, there's artistry. There are great artists who know how to torture themselves on stage and really, they get to the gritty, the ugly, painful, smelly dimensions of human existence. But they do it because they also know the other extreme. So, I think we all have a right to a more artistic approach to how we live, how we um, treat ourselves, how we act in the world, how we engage with other people. So yeah, um,
I love that, the idea that we all have the right to be an artist. And again, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but it sounds like if you're distinguishing between a particular dancer who maybe doesn't strike you so artistic, whereas your mother just wearing the many hats she had to wear, or the Tai Chi practitioner in the park, it sounds like part of what you're talking about is intention and choice. Like it might be, I just have to go to work at my job at the office today, but I still get to choose how I walk in the door. I get to choose how, I talk to my coworkers, or how I do things. And it seems like that's maybe a bit of what you're referring to with artistry, and of course there are more traditional ideas about the artistic professions, but you're making a broader point when you tell people they have the right to be an artist. And just for listeners, you have a class which I was lucky enough to attend earlier today. You're teaching right now, which is called core artistry, and core being that middle part of our body. But you were not teaching so-called six-pack abs or core strength. It was core artistry. So what's the distinction?
I'm not going to judge someone with a six pack, with eight pack, 10 pack. It's lovely. And, again, like we are at this age of Instagram, and that's what draws a lot of people, right? Is to have that image. So I also want to help those who have that ambition of achieving that type of body, you know, like superhero body, that they can go there. And it's what I use. I don't know if it's, you know, genetically, I work out a bit and then like I do see results, but I do think that with Feldenkrais, it helped me be more refined. And it's that closer examination, that space of appreciation, you know, of just the variety of ways you can move in, that helped me, I think, define how I, you know, how I'm muscularly built right now, how I appear muscularly, especially in the abs, the famous abs. So I don't want to um, preclude that, right, as a possibility,
But we
but
didn't do exercise in your class. I mean, you talked about how to use the low abdomen. You talked about the ribs. You made a big
yeah,
point about finding the power in the, you know, the upper chest and how to use the base of the neck. And there was a lot of detail, but it was
yeah,
also it was a very exploratory class. And I'm just talking about the class today, but it fits in with this theme.
yeah, and because you know this thing about artistry, again, choices and knowing what you have on your palette. That's something I like to say a lot, you know, this because that or was the cliche image of an artist, right? With maybe a beret and that wooden round palette with your different colors on it. And for me, learning to move better and be an artist meant that I had more variety of um, paint. So I knew that I was painting with this shade of blue because that's what I wanted. That's the effect I'm going for, not just because, oh, okay, that's what they sold at the local grocery store and that's what I'm going to use. But even if that were the case, you still know how to combine it with the white, with the black, you know, with different colors to achieve what you want. Okay, so before stretching too far in that analogy, but so knowing all these subtleties that make a difference in the lesson and in real life, that's why I call this class core artistry. And it goes back to Tai Chi again, and dance as well, because like especially in partnering, I like doing partnering things now because I realize that, you know, Michael Jackson's song, right? The Man in the Mirror. So you can change yourself and you will be able to have more effect or less effect on the world, the surroundings. So by how I'm using my core, I can direct the person, be directed, and I'm actually more able to be in sync with the person and leverage when I need to, sync when I, you know, and give in or work against the person. So I have choice within me, and it's these subtleties that does it. And this comes from my observations of Tai Chi. And when I don't have such extensive um, practice and knowledge of, yeah, of doing Tai Chi, but I've watched it a lot. You know, it's been in my head for a long time from observing um, as a child as well. But when I did the class with a really good master in Hong Kong, he's like, you know, Tai Chi is like this. In other martial arts, you might want to, you know, you just want to end the person quickly, you know. But Tai Chi has this like extra um twist where it's like they want the person to not die immediately, but take 3 to 5 days to really bleed out internally. And
I've
so
never heard Tenchi explain
yeah,
that
so
before.
it's very we call it tok, which is like poisonous. It's very it's like venomous, you know, it's very yeah, it's evil.
That's how it sounds.
And you know within that and so these beautiful spirals and whatever, like this is what gets you really deep in there and, really get them where it hurts, and it's not superficial. So this is also why it relates to artistry. Hopefully people use artistry for the better, right? For the good. But for me, it's really important to know how to, of course, I'm showing all the time flexion, but how to use the back as well. If you're pulling someone, do you pull this way, pulling this way? It's all about doing what you want and doing what is needed for the moment, right? So for me, this is really interesting how, just placing a finger here and then knowing that I can fold even more here. And if I were pulling someone, I would be able to pull them with more leverage. It's one of my favorite words now because I've heard it so much, in the context of like lawyers and lawsuits and things. But then to really find the lever, that I create another type of lever, another strength of lever in order to provide that strength through my arms. And so touching here, it's different. Touching here is another, thing that I get. So it's all these small details where small cannot be mistaken for insignificant. Small is just small in range, but it has a lot of significance on the end outcome or the quality of the outcome, right? Maybe you'll be able to end the person, injure the person, either way, but how do you injure them and to what degree? Maybe that's what you have control over.
Oh, this is great. No, I never expected we would be talking about, how to end someone in the most venomous way. But there you go.
And it's, maybe it'll be a new workshop, like how to be deadly, and just leave that open, where I would go for
All
how
right,
to.
you said deadly, so then I have to bring up Naomi Campbell.
Yeah, like this was when I did. We
So
spoke
wait,
about.
fill in for people that because you and I know what we're talking about, but you have often talked about how Naomi Campbell moves down the walkway and just like you're doing right now, and which vertebra does she excel in the use of?
C7
E7, the
and
lowest vertebra in the neck. And what is it she's doing? And also, why did it have such an impact on you? How does it fit into your story? So people know why I made
yeah.
that segue.
It's about um attractiveness, confidence. So how people see you, how you feel, you must feel damn good, as Naomi Campbell, with that perfect long straight hair, right? In those pumps, with that body going down a runway, right? So also movement is about the confidence of your health.
And how does the C7 help her do that?
And again, deadliness and like martial arts. So the word predatorial comes out, where I often joked, you look at Naomi Campbell and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know whether I should be like attracted or if I should run in fear. It's like, do I pounce on her, or is she gonna pounce on me? And that
She's got
it's
that
that in
stare.
between.
It's like,
Yeah, it's like a jaguar, let's say. It's a feline predator, and you're like completely mesmerized by the majesty, but at the same time you're afraid. But in between, or the combination, is allure, right? And we did this lesson, and in Feldenkrais, there's so much talk
Feldenkrais
about
awareness through movement.
seven. Yeah.
Uh,
So then it was this lesson where you keep your head fixed, of course, to a comfortable degree, turn to one side, and you're rolling your pelvis side to side, pushing through a foot, the other foot. Then you do it by leaning your knees. So you're finding these different variations of how to move your pelvis, then lengthen one leg, the other one. And so you're finding all this movement below your relatively still skull. So and it's something very novel for the brain, right? Because normally we're moving the head, and then everything else is a bit more still. But the head is in the foreground. But then here, the head is that which does not move, but moves relatively to the other moving parts. And then I stood up and I was like, damn, this is Naomi Campbell. Because we were talking about um, why head stability is such a big stability and mobility, why that's a huge theme in our Feldenkrais work. And it's because it has everything to do with survival again, right? That you need to have stability so that you can orient, you can see where danger is coming and move away from it, identifying what, or going towards something. But if just to show, that if you didn't have any independence, your head from your trunk, and it was moving like this, this would be a threat to your survival, like running like this, everything will be a bit fuzzier, your eye muscles have to like constantly just hold the eye, or I don't know, eyeballs, or like stabilize. Like it's a very different dynamic than to have the neck free, the shoulders free. And so when you think about a like a lion, a tiger, a leopard, whatever, that any animal that's hunting seems to have the head pretty stable.
Right.
So then, you've always got the prey fixed, right? And it also you see there's a difference, it communicates a different confidence as well, right? If we look at it from that way, rather than being like this,
Right.
right? This is like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm gonna make it or not, and here is like, it's just a matter of time.
Right.
So again, the whole expression is different. And I think, when I watched Naomi Campbell, and I was like something in my, it was like the fifth element, it just something passed through, connected. I was like, this is Naomi Campbell, this is Naomi Campbell, Eureka, Eureka. And then, of course, I spent some nights just watching Naomi Campbell catwalks on YouTube. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's so good. And this is how she balances because of this
Yeah.
stability. She can cross her legs, and it's like this.
Right. Well, I told you how I watched some of these videos because I hadn't thought much about Naomi Campbell before meeting you. And it's true, her head is like she's like zooming down, but her hips are swaying, swaying. And then I saw that she literally steps one foot over the other, even though she's walking often very quickly. And
Mhm.
just to do that, a lot of people would fall over. But part of it, again, is the fact that because her head is staying, and I can't just pull it off quite as well as you can, but that there's this movement right at the base, which is allowing for all that movement to go on in the hips and the head to stay there. But Feldenkrais, some people know this, but people don't necessarily encounter this if they come to an awareness through movement class for the first time. He, he was a judo person. He was involved in actual street battles. As a young person, and survival was a big question for him. And so he made a big point that, if you want to be a potent person, your head, and especially your eyes, which are there on your head, have to be free. No matter what you're doing with your body, you
Yeah.
need to be able to decide where you're looking, and so this is yeah, there's a lot of things in the method that have to do with the carriage of the head on top of the spine and the ability to turn and look here and there. So, but it's what I love about your story too is also that connection where you had seen something, with Naomi Campbell, and maybe at a certain point it was just like, how does she do that? And then you went through a process where you discovered in your own self-image, like, that's what she's doing. And now I can embody a little bit of that feeling. It connects back, I think, to what you're saying too earlier, just in your descriptions of dancers and how movement communicates, right? So it seems almost, if I hear your story right, it's you did the Feldenkrais that lesson that day. You discovered something about this part of your spine, but you also discovered a new way to communicate almost in that
Yeah.
experience.
And, I really feel like I got an upgrade, especially with my job as the rehearsal director here with the dance company, that I got to be, or I got to practice this Feldenkrais lens, this understanding even more. And so today I was just working with a dancer, and, I feel like I would like the title of expression consultant, or um, expression legibility consultant, because she's a beautiful dancer, and you would really not think much of it, just so available, gooey, flexible, strong, all that you want in the body. And I'm like, something just doesn't really read as much or as concretely as I know it can. And it was something to do with the the it was like an avoidance of this front space in front of the face, where I think there are lessons with the mouth, the tongue sucking, in Feldenkrais. And then I didn't really get them during my training, but in recent months I'm like, wow, we relate, we have a certain conditioned use of the mouth and spatial relationship, where you wouldn't go around your neighborhood like this. It's again, it's socially incorrect, it's uncomfortable, there's something off-putting about it. And so there was this thing about the face, the mouth, all the eyes, something, it was like it didn't enter into the space. So there was a lot of hand gestures, and there was looking, but it never really was a look. And I'm like, just something was not sitting right. And to be able to work on the different parts of her choreography, it was her own solo, in this respect I found it so much more rewarding than saying exactly what she needs to do at each time, but like other things to think about, like, is there some sort of hesitation to close this space? And you know and the use of the eyes as well, like, are you just in contemporary dance, I joke that there's like a blank face, you let
I
the
think
audience
I think
like,
I've seen that face before. Uh-huh.
but then the eyes, what if you do something here and it's like a thought inside, look out, there's so many levels of expression again within one moment or one tiny portion of the choreography, that normally it's just it remains um undissected, unexamined. So this is how I'm working with her, me, and she had the theme of corners, um yeah, borders, corners, safety, limitation, conflict. Uh, and then I'm like, oh, but what about the corners, getting into the deep corners of your hip joints? So that also it was relating to the head, where if you keep everything here, it's hard to land really hinge into the hip than when you actually have the face more available forwards. And so that again, but what was remarkable was that the arms became so much clearer. It was like the next thing on my notes. I was like, okay, we don't even need to talk about your arms, because everything, there's this legibility, which is related to a mechanical, um, it's like a fulfillment. This is how I'll put it, that there's a fulfillment. It's not like sort of mid limbo held, you know, according to what you think it should look like, but to actually go to the depth of the hinging that you get to change. And then, okay, there. So by moving the hip, I'm moving the head, and moving the head, the shoulder comes, and then I don't need to produce the arm, but because of the weight away, the arm comes into realization. So I don't know, I'm having a lot of fun looking at dance in this in from this respect. And I think that moving on, it will be very interesting to work with people in expression to see, you know, in the workplace. Again, if you're at a big conference, a big meeting where you need to leverage, or you need leverage to convince people, you know, how you are spatially and where you set your weight, how you move your weight is something that people's brains are tuning into, whether they want it or not. And it's these subliminal uh, cues that can make or break deals and things. So
It almost seems like, I mean, that was a story about you working with a dancer who's preparing a performance. So it's very clear that, you know, there's something she's wanting to communicate, and that sounds like part of what you were working with her on. I mean, aside from, you know, the deep corners of the hip joints wasn't, as you mentioned, because she doesn't know how to use her hip joints, but it was more like accessing a different expression. But it seems like, this question of performance, or at least how we move when we're performing. In other words, how we move when we know we're being looked at. We bring a level, I mean, of course, it could be a negative thing, like I'm just super insecure because everyone's looking at me, I'm like a deer in headlights. But maybe performance, in kind of best case scenario, when I actually am on stage and I feel good about it, there's something about that that might be a way that it would be just how I'd like to walk down the street also. I mean, again, drawing on some of my own experience, and thinking back now to when I was playing a lot of music, I remember often feeling like, just as a young person, as many people, young people feel uncomfortable and awkward for a number of reasons. And I could strangely sometimes feel more comfortable when I was performing because, oh, this is not me being bizarre and crazy, because this is the context. Like, people have gathered and sat down and they're looking, and now they want to see something that's a little out of the ordinary. So I might be rehearsing and making things up. And as you know, I play with my voice and I do all kinds of funny things. And I've had the experiences of like just doing this on my own and someone overhears it and they're like, what the hell are you doing? But I didn't feel that when I was performing. And so I often wondered about that. Like, why can't I have that comfort all the time? It seems like that's a little bit of, you know, I'm just reflecting on what I'm getting from listening to you, because at the same time, there's so much stories and so many things to talk about with you in terms of your dance experience. But again, a lot of the people you teach are not dancers. They're not, you know, considering themselves artists, but clearly this is the eye that you bring, comes from your artistic background, comes from your performance experience.
yeah, I think you know, just what you were saying about how can I be comfortable, um, you know, more of the time. I think it's a practice where you start noticing what you do to feel uncomfortable, and then to see if you can not only not do that, but maybe do a little bit less, do a little bit more, intensify it. And this is also quite Feldenkrais, right? To find the different shades of what you're doing until it just becomes an option. So you can always choose to be there, and there's no, we shouldn't always be comfortable. And you know, again, I use the function, as it would mean to an actor, you know, to illustrate this, where an actor was always comfortable. That's only one dimension of a character. You also need to know how to be anxious, how to be jubilant, right? Completely freaked out, panicking. You know, there are many things which it's part of the function of an actor. So we should know how to do everything. But if comfort, more constant comfort is what you're interested in, then it's to remind yourself that it's a learning process and you can get better at it, right? That maybe, okay, when you're really anxious and then, you know, you've done some breathing lesson, and I always just love having my hands around here. Is it moving? Because sometimes it's just, it's still not part of the program. There's a stronger program that I've been conditioned to just hold this still, you know, to be reserved and not betray what I'm actually feeling, and to hold this still. But the moment I remind myself this can move, then things seem to, they don't seem, they actually do feel better, that there's more room because I'm just moving, I'm creating more room inside. And just, so I think it's learning to recognize those key things that you might be doing to make you uncomfortable, the things that you're not doing that you could do to make you comfortable, and then more, you just have more in your toolbox, and you just need to get better at reminding yourself. Yeah, but with the people who are not performers, I don't know, I just think I don't think I've ever felt more artistic than being a Feldenkrais teacher, because I love, it's like going into a gallery, you know, I want to show people the beauty. And in the end, it's all these paintings and sculptures of themselves. It's like, look how magnificent you are. And I think that it's just very, that for me is what gets me, you know. That's what I want to be doing. To teach you how to move. So many other people can move better. You'll have, you know, there are better looking instructors. Some people just go to a class because, you know, it's someone really hot right in front, and I'm like, you can look for that elsewhere. But then I really want you to think that you're hot, to feel that you're hot, and start believing that you are truly beautiful with possibility. And you know, if fitness again is your thing, then yeah, you'll be moving in ways where you're more prone to want to move, perhaps. And then you'll be moving in ways that you're sculpting your body in a way that you exteriorly also uh, become very proud of and feel good about. So yeah.
It seems like we all begin with a sort of limited range of choices, or a limited range of ideas about what's possible. And it seems like you're describing a process where, first of all, someone just needs to expand the range to see, you know, did you know what you could do with C7? Or did you ever think of moving forward with your mouth? Oh, that's so different. But then when you've established that, then it's like you have choice for the first time in a way, because sure, I got this far doing what I was told to do and sort of fitting in and, you know, checking all the right boxes. And yet I wasn't even aware of the range of possibilities. And then once I know the range, it doesn't mean I have to go and do every last thing. Um, you and I have talked, you know, sometimes we have little marketing talk, right? And we talk about taglines. Earlier when you were talking, I was, I don't know, it just popped into my head. Something like you could have a class that was like from range of motion to range of emotion. Because it seems like, you know, this is a thing. If I can't be angry, right? If it's not okay for me to express anger, you know, that's gonna be something that's gonna limit the way I move my body. Or on the other end, if I can't be vulnerable, if I can't be, you know, humble, or whatever it is, there's those ideas we have, as you were saying in the beginning, the story that we tell about ourselves. So
Yeah.
we're having a thoughtful moment in the podcast here. I know you probably have to wrap it up soon, but could you maybe say something? You had a thought there, maybe that you're about to put words to, but also just one thing I'd love to ask you directly about before we finish, and we've been dancing around with it already, and you've been literally. I feel like I have a different idea of how to move as I talk. I mean, gosh, wow, I got to move more than just my lips here. But what is your personal practice like? At this point, you've come a long way, but what do you think about in terms of, um, just like the possibilities do seem endless, and yet time is not endless. We live in this world of infinite choices, right? There's so many things out there when log on to the internet or just look at what's going on in your city and what should I do tonight. And yet we have to make choices. So what are the kinds of things that you're working on, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I think dreaming, fantasy, and maybe it's fantasy that helps, like fantasizing about these projects. You were talking about marketing, and I realized, I used to judge marketing, and anything to do with selling seemed to be super superficial and only self-serving and not doing anything for the greater good. But then again, realizing that expression, self-expression is, and communication is an important human function, that we're always marketing ourselves, how I'm addressing, everyone through this podcast, how I'm placed, like we just need, I think it's we can it's human. Let's not judge it, and let's become even better, more skillful at it. And so I want to, I don't know, I just dream of these things, how to, helping your daily marketing, market, the marketing guru within you, something fun like that. So a lot of fantasy. I think what's moving a lot is my cerebral nature, that I feel that I love moving in here more than actually here. I can barely run 2 kilometers. And I absolutely, have no problem saying that I hate it. It's not joyful for me, that I need to trick myself in order to like exercise and be explosive in order to like stay somewhat fit. But yeah, it's I think what we've been talking about, getting to know yourself better and finding that refinement, which is appreciation again. Everyone's talking about gratitude and the benefits of gratitude, for health, well-being. I think it's that has helped me to envision, these bigger projects, teaching Feldenkrais, sharing more of my perspectives, along those lines, and to also fantasize about the objective ways, like the substantial ways that I can actually put those fantasies into action and reality.
Right, because it would seem like a practice of any kind, whether it's a religious practice or a movement practice or a writer who just writes every day, um, there is a way that we don't want to only fantasize or dream or envision things. We want to make them real.
Yeah.
So, in terms of that, how do you work with yourself through the course? I mean, I know you're a busy guy with the dance company and you're teaching, but there's also time that you're with yourself and you have some time to practice. And I guess maybe what you've been saying maybe describes a little of what inspires the practice. But what does the practice look like? What are the things that you know?
I mean, I try as much as possible. Well, when I'm teaching a warm-up dance class, ballet class, is generally what I teach. Um, then that's my movement practice, and I think like the essence of my movement practice is that I'm very hyper aware and like constantly experimenting, to see, if it's just, and it's very simple, how to like lift the leg and how to just bend. You know, what happens if I think about the right eye? What happens if I think about the right ear as I'm doing this? What happens if it's the weight of the hair? Then something else changes. And so I think it's about just flying around this universe of myself and just I have fun in that way. So that would be my movement practice to
It sounds
find.
like something you're kind of doing all the time.
Yeah, it's really all the time. Even as I'm talking to you in the background,
Well,
I'm
that's
like,
clear.
okay, so what's the shape of this? What's the shape of this? You know, the ring of the first ribs that I got from Olena Night for. And you know, how's this moving through space as I'm speaking to you? And then what, you know, it just keeps, it's something that always runs in the background. So maybe this is why that I sort of stay slim. It's because I'm burning all the calories up here. I have often thought about that because I'm just always thinking. And but that has also become like the hum of my meditation, which I don't, you know, I don't think that meditation is about that blankness, you know, but it's that stream
Do you
maybe.
meditate regularly?
I make it a regular practice, half an hour when I wake up. Some days I miss it and I do not penalize myself for doing that. But I since this past Christmas, I'm like, okay, have been enough podcasts, inspirational speakers talking about meditation, so I would do that. But doing Feldenkrais, you know, we enter that zone as well, where you're sort of like drifting off, and it feels great and amazing. You're not here, you're not there. So I think that there's a meditative aspect as well. But I think it's what you do as well, you know, you're always playing and being creative, and I get bored very easily. So like even if I'm doing something like this, I'm searching for like, okay, what's the quality of the hands? Now I notice that my back wants to do something with it. How am I breathing? You know, the pinky finger, and then now this is the third finger, and the fourth one. I might think about fingernail. So like that stuff that I,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
do.
I love that. I mean, I think a lot about how even in a simple movement, there's so many different ways to use the attention. And you were just demonstrating that with your fingers or moving and talking about moving from the hair or the ear. And what that does for me, anyways, is that, you know, I don't get bored
Yeah,
because you can, if even if the movement looks repetitive, if there's a way that you can continually shift your perspective on what you're doing, or um, it's like, you know, we always have more information than we can process, but we also have the capacity to shine the spotlight in a different place. And so learning to do that can really enrich even the simple, even just walking, you know, walking down the street or
yes.
something.
And you know, I don't feel the need to perform on stage these days. I mean, if there's a good reason, you know, there's a really good impulse, I'm gonna go with it. But I feel that I'm dancing whenever I'm walking. This is another thing. Sorry for so much Feldenkrais, you know, emphasis, but you know, it's really something that I really thank Feldenkrais for it, because I feel like a dancer no matter what I do now. I'm on my bike and I'm just like shifting, you know, and again, it's not like the shifting of the sit bones, you know, as I'm biking, it's fun to just notice, but also to see how am I changing up here? Does it feel good or not? You know, there's so many things also about the effect, right? Does it feel good? How is my breathing? Oh, my voice. Oh, I would catch my voice differently if I'm like this. Okay, how are people perceiving me now? You know, if they see me moving in these strange ways. So for me, I don't know. It really is a layer I take everywhere, but I feel that because I have that layer of appreciation, and then I also have the structure to play with. I know where I can move my attention and what that will probably do. I have that structure of knowledge, that system to play. Then it's artistic because there are choices. You know, there's exploration. There's something new um, coming forth. So Yeah, I guess that's it. Um, it's definitely not, I try to, with the dancers, they love working out and, I see the benefit of it. But like, even as I'm doing a push-up, I'm like, okay, how heavy can I make it? And this was really what I wanted to do with the class today, because if you're, I'm usually more extended I'm like, okay, natural curves of the spine, and I'm like this. But then to really push when I'm in like downward dog or something, it's not as easy as when I have this, when I just let my attention go to the ribs and I do something small, and then I'm like, okay, there, I feel a bit more grounded, versus doing something like this, like that, like, these small changes and feeling the effect. It's really, I don't know, it's very entertaining.
Yeah, well, and your excitement about it comes through, and I think it's infectious, and I think that's why people are having so much fun in your classes these days. I bet we could go on for another 2 hours, but maybe can you just quickly tell people who might be curious to connect with you, how would they do that?
Yeah, so my website is now www.paulsfeldenkrais with the S, .com. And you can find me on Instagram at Paul underscore moves, or Paul's Feldenkrais project. I still have to add the S for the Instagram, but that'll
Excellent.
come.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great. So we can put some of that information below the video.
And
Um,
not to forget that we're teaching together.
That's right. Well,
That's it.
if people see this around the time we're putting it out, we did a collaboration already with the Wim Hof instructor, Brian Morrison, and the three of us are going to be doing something starting at the end of this month, the month of May 2021, the Anytime, Anywhere Awareness class or program. We can put a link to that too, and people will check it out. But that's exciting to me because I guess we have to do a little bit of a sales pitch right now, but above all, what I just wanted to say about the class is what you and I will bring from Feldenkrais and what Brian will bring from the Wim Hof method. In this class, it's really aimed at the experience we have walking down the street, or you know those situations when we're with our family, like you were describing. It's really about taking the learning that we often do in a sort of formal practice, like, okay, I'm going to my movement class now, or I'm sitting down to meditate, and how can those benefits and some of those um, some of those pieces of learning that we get through going inwards sometimes and exploring, how can we take that back out into the world that's moving and it's loud and stuff is going on, and still have access to that kind of grounding. And yeah, we're going to sort of be trading, teaching, taking turns, and I think it's going to be a cool class. um, is there any final words that you'd like to maybe just say to people who are listening, who are thinking about, you know, how can they move forward in their own movement practice? People who perhaps, have been exposed to a variety of different kinds of movement traditions, but they're looking for their own way.
Mm. Yeah, I think you just have to have some faith in that you know best, that listening shouldn't be underestimated. That if you allow, and I'm not saying it's easy, because, I catch myself to listen and trust that there is validity in your way, what you feel. Um, it takes some guts, but treat it as an experiment. Maybe that's what it is, experiment and explore. If you don't fail, you really don't know what success would be like. So, as I like to say as well, that when you're coloring, or sketching, you don't draw something like the Mona Lisa with the first stroke and you're like, that's gonna be the same stroke, for centuries and centuries. But you draw a little bit, okay, that's the kind of the idea, a little bit right, left, darker, it's sketching, and then you get somewhere, something shapes. So experiment, and yeah, you'll find it.
I love that. Great. Well, thanks so much, Paul. This was a ton of fun, and maybe we'll do it again some point in the future.
Yes.
But it was, again, just a pleasure to connect with you and learn more of your story. And I think people are going to really enjoy what you had to say.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Seth. And thank goodness we pressed record.
We finally talked and pressed record.
Yes.
All right. Take care, Paul.
Thank you.